Hi guys, welcome to Universal Recovery. I'm Sap. Today we are joined, honored, humbled, blessed to have Jeremy with us from Conscious Recovery. Hi Jeremy, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, Saf. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited.
Oh, great, man. What do you think about my new intro? Was
I
it was
love
that a
it.
bit like pow in your face? Was it?
I'm fired up, man.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
man. Well, look, welcome, man. Really great to have you. Hi guys, we're Universal Recovery. Uh, we took a week off last week. Do not ask me why, but it's one of those things. Unfortunately, the show could not go on, but we're back again. We're back again today, and we are part of Spirituality Gone Wild, and we are a show dedicated mainly to addiction, but we talk about trauma and mental health and anything that we need to talk about. And of course, keep your comments coming in. But it's good to be back, and it's good to have Jeremy here as well. Now, Jeremy works alongside TJ Woodward, who's obviously another one of our hosts on Universal Recovery. You and TJ, for people who are either watching live or who are watching later, you're part of a creation that TJ predominantly created called Universal Recovery. Um, Conscious Recovery. Could you tell us a bit about Conscious Recovery and again, this is more for people who are new to the show and what it represents and your involvement with Conscious Recovery, please, Jeremy.
Yeah, sure. So, Conscious Recovery was a book written by T.J. Woodward, and his perspective, the main principle of conscious recovery is that underneath all addictive behaviors, there is an essential self that is whole and perfect. And so, conscious recovery, for the most part, looks at addiction and recovery through a spiritual lens. And rather than addressing symptoms and behaviors, we're more curious about the deeper root causes. And so, my role with TJ is essentially leveraging my skill set with digital marketing and public speaking and things like that to propel the message to a broader audience.
Well, and conscious recovery, guys, is and we must stress. I'm a big advocate for conscious recovery, and I'm still training within this modality, with this which is wonderful, and I'm combining it with my own process and a bit of human behavioral work. We're putting it all together. What I must stress and want to stress is that we're not, whether it's conscious recovery or the Buxy recovery process or anything that's out there, we're not here to disregard any other modality. We're not just here to disregard the 12-step fellowships, the 12-step program, or any recovery projects or any recovery outlets that are out there. We're there to be in addition to, because not everything is for everyone, but whatever works, works. And if it's going to help you in your addiction, if it's going to help you with your trauma, if it's going to help you with mental health, then we are there for you. We've got a few. We've got Priya, who I think is new to the show. Hi, Priya. How you doing? She says hello and look forward to your amazing show. Great intro. Thank you very much. And we have Tanya, who I believe is also new to the show, even though the name does ring a bell a little bit. Hi, Tanya. Welcome to the show. If I don't respond to everyone, it's because we're on so many different platforms. I only have access to this platform, but I will be looking at my phone at other platforms, and I will try and acknowledge you and try and give you a shout out if I can. But myself and Jeremy were talking offline, and we talk a lot about trauma. We talk a lot about the causes of addiction and the root causes and topics like that. But we haven't really talked about codependency and enabling, and how that plays a part in addiction in particular. And it's a difficult one, isn't it, Jeremy? Because when I was in addiction, my family, in a way, were not, and I feel guilty saying enabling, but in a way, they were enabling my addiction in a sense that they were letting me do what I wanted to do. So they weren't exactly pay like some people, like, I mean, when I was young, I mean, and the funny thing is, yeah, how do you know you're enabling someone when you don't know that they're in addiction in the first place? There's so many questions I want to ask, and I want to put it out there. But I wanted to hear your thoughts about codependency and enabling an addict who's a loved one, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is it's a huge topic, and you know what came up for me when you were speaking to feeling guilt around even naming it as enabling. You know, what came up for me was this. There's this thing where when we're in addiction, we are so good at hiding from everybody, and
Yeah.
so it makes it really easy for people around us to become enabling because most of the time they don't know exactly what we're up to or the extent of what we're doing. And to me, codependence is, you know, the way I look at codependence is it's kind of got this really harsh connotation these days. And, you know, I think it's important to acknowledge and recognize that as human beings, we do depend on other human beings. So from infancy all the way through adolescence, we are physically, mentally, emotionally dependent on our caregivers. And as a species, we've survived as long as we have because we depend on whoever is raising us or nurturing us and giving us life and protecting us and so on. And so I think the word codependence gets thrown around really broadly. And to me, what it really means, what it's really pointing to is relying on someone else for my own emotional well-being. So if I, as an adult, as someone who is independent in the world, I still rely on my network, my friends, my family for my own stability, but my own opinion of myself doesn't rely on the opinion of others. So it starts getting really, it can get messy when what I think of me is based exclusively on what other people think of me. And you see this a lot in recovery where people, you know, who are newly sober, they have this loss of identity. If I'm not Jeremy the addict or alcoholic, then who am I? And oftentimes I'll look to other people to answer that question rather than going within and discovering my true essence for myself.
And that's so right what you just said, Jeremy. I mean, codependency, enabling, encouraging. Of course, it's done. I mean, nobody wants to encourage a loved one into addiction. Nobody wants to. I mean, I hear of stories where parents can, you know, can see that there's an issue with their child. They can see that there's an issue with their child. They're overindulging, or you know, or taking too much drugs or alcohols. And when the son or the daughter comes to the mum and dad and say, "Look, can I borrow some money? Can I have some money?" And they give the money. They give the money. And they feel guilty if they don't give the money because the son is obviously, or the daughter's obviously lied that they want it for food. But we full well know that my son or my daughter has a drug problem, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to spend it on a bag of weed or buy some cocaine or whatever. But yet we still, as parents, some parents still give them the money. Before you respond to that, I want to say a couple of shouts out on the other platform that we're on to Kelly. Hi Kelly, lovely to see you. Kelly Birdgreen, welcome back, good to see you and back on the show. Hi Thomas, and hi Durgesh, good to have you here as well. And we have Tanya, who is saying such wise advice. Thank you. And it's exactly that. I mean, where did you stand on that? I mean, I want to go back one other level. There used to be, and it's a really difficult one, okay? Because there was a time, and I'll hold my hands up to this. I used to walk on the streets in London, and I would see a homeless person, and I would give them money quite freely, and I do now sometimes. I'd rather buy them food now, but I would give them money this is before I knew anything about addiction, whatever. Now, when I go in the streets of London, because of the enabling and the codependency, I'm reluctant. It's such a fine line. I'm reluctant to give them any money because I know full well that they're probably going to buy drugs with that or buy alcohol with that. So I prefer to buy them food, and I bought food for people, and they've actually thrown the food back at me, which is quite bizarre, really. But then, knowing the field the way I know now, I know the dangers of withdrawals from alcohol. So if the homeless guy is drinking alcohol, and more often than not they are as part of whatever them else might be doing, and they're drinking alcohol heavily, one part of me says, if I give them money, I'm codepending. I'm enabling them to drink and take drugs. The other part of me is that if I don't give them the money, is there a chance that they could suffer from withdrawals because they can't afford to get that drink? And that could be fatal. It's like, what do we do in that instance? What do we do?
Well, it's a big question, Saf, because, you know, when we look at the family dynamic and, you know, under a lens of enabling and codependency, it's almost the same mechanism as your example walking the streets of London with people without homes. And what I've seen most commonly in my experience in the field over the years is that addiction is, you know, we know what it is, we know what it looks like, we know how it manifests in the world. But nobody's quite yet figured out why it happens, where it comes from, why it's so difficult to get out of for some, why it's relatively easy for others. So there is a lot of mystery, and modalities like conscious recovery and AA, NA, refuge, all these different treatment modalities, we're all trying to get to the same destination, just maybe perhaps on different paths. And so when we put ourselves in the shoes of the parents, and there's someone in active addiction in the home, oftentimes it's, I don't know how to help, right? And because oftentimes addiction is, you know, in conscious recovery, we look at the underlying root causes of addiction as unresolved trauma, toxic shame, and spiritual disconnection. Right. Well, that applies to more than just the person who's actively in addiction. That applies to mom, dad, brother, sister. And so when you have this collective of people and they all have wounds, they all have unresolved trauma or spiritual disconnection or toxic shame, when I see my son or daughter in so much pain, it can be really hard for me to know what to do to support them in that. And almost always it comes down to, I can't be with their pain because of my own pain and how uncomfortable this all is. Money is kind of this quick solution, right? So with your example of the people in London, you give money, and in exchange for that, you get a feeling of goodwill, right? So in mom and dad's case, it's not really different. It's, I'm trying to help my kid, and this is the best that I can help them. And so while I agree, I prefer personally to give food, I also hold that if I make myself responsible for everybody's well-being, that's codependency.
Yes.
Right? I can't, if I wish I could support all the, you know, I'm in Santa Cruz, California, and there's a massive homeless population here, and it breaks my heart. I know what's going on. And I often go into this heavy guilt or shame, like, man, I wish there was more I could do. And so rather than kind of assume this burden of how can I help this person completely change their life, and I don't even know them, and do I give them food or do I give them money? I say, where can I have influence today? Where can I have a positive impact today? And I act on that instead. And I think the real key here within the family is that even an enabling parent, they're doing what they're doing because they believe it's the right thing to do. Very rarely is it out of malice or neglect. It's usually, I don't know what to do for my child other than support them financially. And that's what kind of perpetuates that cycle.
Exactly that. I mean, I had a client once, a young kid under the age of 18, and the first thing I want to say is we always go back to the connection and the disconnection. I mean, it's even got to a stage, as is it Gabor or someone else said, that let's not call it addiction. Let's call it connection. Let's call it bonding. Let's not call it addiction anymore. Because if we are disconnected, if something is missing in our lives, we will look at something else. And as you say, conscious recovery, and we're very reluctant to call it a coping strategy. We call it a brilliant strategy, don't we? As opposed to a coping mechanism. And I think connection, love, bonding, are all key elements here to stop stop someone enabling. And I'll give you an example in a minute of what I was just about to say, but I've got a couple of comments here. And this is such a great comment from Priya Patel. She said, I would always, and she's talking about the homeless, I guess, I would always give them food, 100%. Hare Krishna, food for life. Okay, beautiful. Give free prasad. Prasad is I think it's food, or it's a dessert, I think. And time to the homeless. And that's what it is, time, connection. The homeless are appreciative of this service, and the time we take to talk to homeless people is so valuable, money cannot buy. And that is so beautiful. And we have to do that with family members. We have to do that with anyone who's suffering from addiction. Of course, with homeless people, of course. But this is with anyone. Give time, spend time, come love, work together, work as a collective, work in communion. That's the only way that we can move forward. It's the only way we can grow, and we can educate each other, support each other. That's the best way. Priya goes on to say, time and love and loving humans is so important. Priya, I need you on the show because we're thinking the same right now. Beautiful. So I've got another message. I'm not sure who you are because you haven't given Facebook permission, StreamYard permission. But this person says, and thank you for your comment, and please give us your name so we can give you a shout out. This person says, follow your heart. At the moment, sometimes just listening to them will provide answers. I've been on both sides of the fence. So very often I ached for compassion. Now that's what I offer. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And please give us your name so we can give you a shout out. And that's what it's about, isn't it? Look at unresolved trauma, look at unresolved issues. Let's look into it if the client wishes to, because sometimes there is things that we need to work through to work out why life is what it is today. I know when I was in active addiction, it's not until I came into recovery I started looking back at my life. I started looking at how I can move forward, and I started looking at all the tools and skills that I could use. But this story that I wanted to say to you, by the way, that person is Zappa Costa. Hi, Zappa. Welcome to the show. Joe Zappa Costa. Hi, Joe. I think we've had you before. Welcome back to the show. Thank you for letting us know. Good shout out to you. Very, very wealthy family. The child, I think at the time was 15, 16 years old. And he played up a lot. All of a sudden, he reached an age, Jeremy, where he started playing up, started being aggressive, swearing at the family. It's about that time he started smoking cannabis. And the parents, one used to let him get away with absolutely everything because out of love, and two, gave him what he wanted, whether it's materialistic things or financial things. And the reason why they did that is because they wanted harmony in the house. The reason why they did that is because they did not want any kind of discord. They wanted peace, and they wanted just to live life the way it was before this episode started. Later on, he was diagnosed with ADHD. But putting all that to one side, do you hear that quite often? People give money, people do this just for harmony.
Yeah, and it's interesting because TJ speaks often to boundaries and how, as professionals, we set boundaries with our clients, and boundaries are a very, very important thing. And I think in that example with the very wealthy family that's enabling their son who's starting to act out, and the thought that discipline would throw the house out of harmony really stems from a lack of boundaries years and years before that. And so, and I think it's important too that, you know, like earlier we had a comment that loving humans is so important. And I think personally that's paramount, especially when we're talking about boundaries, right? And boundaries often are looked at like this kind of rigid, firm wall that we put up, but really it's a way of expressing our needs, both as parents and as the children, that say, listen, I'm setting this boundary because I love you. Out of love, here is this boundary. And if we set them in a way that isn't a spiritual boundary, where I can still hold space for you as this whole imperfect, beautiful being, and also hold that we need boundaries in order to function really highly as a family unit. My boundary to you isn't a wall between us, but rather just a perimeter that each of us have awareness of and can play within. Then all of a sudden we spare ourselves a lot of that enabling way down the line, where because I haven't healed my own pain, my own trauma, my own shame, I can't tolerate your pain, your trauma, your shame, right? And then all of a sudden it's, well, all I can do is give money, right? And so if I, as a parent, invest in my own work, if I invest in my own healing, then this really painful experience that my child is going through, I can actually be present with, because it's not touching wounds inside myself, right? And as I'm holding space for my child and we're within boundaries, I can actually hold a space of compassion and love rather than this kind of rigid discipline or reactivity to my own wounding. And so I think that it's really important to come from that place of love, empathy, and compassion, and also not use those things as a spiritual bypass just to avoid confrontation or some sort of difficult conversation.
Thank you. I've got a few messages on all different platforms, so please bear with me, guys. Kelly, hi, wonderful to see you as well. I'm learning boundaries. Hi, Yamea, welcome to the show. Hi, Tanya Simmons, Dr. Tanya Simmons, my partner from Columbus, Ohio. We have a charity together, and she's a best friend, and we do a lot of work together for Healing for the Nations. Priya, hi, Priya. Lincoln Inn Fields and Charing Cross Road are places homeless people receive free food, and I know them both very well. Thanks, Priya. If anyone doesn't know, you can go there. There's also a charity called St Mungo's in London, I guess all over England, who also help with homeless people as well, so please check that out. Hi, Arath, great to have you here from Cambodia. Always a pleasure having you on. Priya goes on and says, Who Moved My Cheese is a great book all about change and how change is important. You can change, the question is when. See the change as a positive to move forward. That's love. Have you read that book? I haven't read that book, Who Moved My Cheese, but it sounds great, so I'd love to read that. And Priya goes on to say, and thank you very much, and of course cannot wait to read your book. Well, it's all over. That gives me a great new opportunity to talk about my book, Jeremy. Addiction, it's all about that. It's called here. I've got loads of them actually. Out of the Madness, A Message of Hope. It's basically my autobiography. We spoke about it in the last show. People are getting value from it, and please do, guys, buy it. There's a couple of free gifts in there as well, and it just tells you my story, and there is a lot of trauma in there, I think, a lot of disconnection, and I think it's a pattern that we hear again and again and again with people who are in particular in addiction. And when we talk about addiction, we're not just talking about substance misuse, alcohol, we're talking behavioral addictions like gambling and sex and pornography and shopping and mobile phones. I mean, what an addiction this is. Is it not? I heard it somewhere else before, but I did. It was in a show that I went to, and the guy said, if I said to you that I'll take your mobile phones away from you for the whole weekend, you'll be looking at me like your drug dealer said he's got no more drugs left. And it's probably true. If I said to you, Jeremy, I'm taking your mobile phone away from you for the next 2 days, you'll be like, what?
Yeah.
And it's like a drug dealer as well. We have another call. Hello. Sorry, don't know who you are. Please send us your name. Amazing to know well about for your book. Thank you so much. I think it's probably Arath. If it's Arath, of course, you can look at it. It's on Amazon and it's all different places. Or go through my website, safbuxy.com. And sugar. Priya says sugar. But it is an addiction, isn't it? Is it addiction?
Yeah.
Is it, yeah, of course it's sweet tooth and all that. Hi, Yamea. Hi, Tanya. Tanya says boundaries. Yes, welcome to the show, Dr. T, and to everyone else around it. Yeah, so enabling. So this family kept on giving in, if you like, to the child, and you hear this again and again and again because the child plays up and the child is causing mayhem and so forth. So they give in by giving money. They give in by giving what the child wants. So I came along and I started working with this child. We went to a psychiatrist, and he was later diagnosed with ADHD, which in a funny kind of way, he may have used that to his advantage once he found that out. But I started working with the client, and I started connecting with the client, and I started listening to him, and being on a level with him. And I think it was easier for me to do that than the parents themselves, because the children often or not play up with the parent anyway, whether it's addiction or not addiction. I think that's normal. But I came along started using the tools that I've learned for my recovery, started using the tools that I learned in my education. A lot of TJ's work, your work, a lot of Gabor's work, a lot of social behavioral DMART, and I put it all into one. And I started not only coming from a place of love, from a place of on the same level as the child, speaking his lingo, but I also started using the tools that I use in my clients with him, looking at the unresolved trauma, looking at different things that they may have not looked at before, but most importantly, connecting with the child, connecting and finding out what is missing from his life for him to behave the same way, what is going on for him, what has happened. And as we were working together, there was a lot of trauma there. And we don't talk about big T, little t trauma. Trauma is trauma, whatever it is. It's personal to you. It's trauma. If something's not going the right way, it's trauma. And we learned that one of the siblings was getting attention in one way more than the other, so he had pressure to achieve in certain aspects of life. I don't want to say too much about it, just in case him or people who know him are watching and they'll know who it is, especially if I say the one particular thing that I would say would possibly give it away. So we worked, we connected, and we worked through it. And thankfully today, I would like to say that he is not using drugs anymore. Yes, look, he's 16, 17 now, so he's acting like any other 16, 17-year-old does. But I like to think that we worked through a certain level, and his relationship with his parents have improved, because I also spoke with them and they've started to connect, and they realize that it's not all about paying or giving this or giving that. It's about being there. It's about showing love. It's about listening. It's not about buying love, even if you got the money. There's only one way that will go, and that is enabling right there.
Yep. Yeah, and with money, it's funny because if I'm in the shoes of the teenager who needs the money, what I'm trying to achieve with that money, whether I'm buying alcohol or drugs or new shoes, is I'm chasing that dopamine rush. I'm chasing a feeling of wholeness. Right? It's because of the brutal messaging that we receive all day, every day, wherever we go, that we are less than. And if we just had this one thing or just had more of this, we wouldn't be less than anymore. And the parents are giving the money for the same reason. And so if I trace back the intention behind the money on both sides, I actually see the same thing. And what I see is a need for love, a need for acceptance, a need to be seen, a need to be heard, right? And new shoes aren't going to do it. Drugs aren't going to do it. Alcohol is not going to do it. Enabling that behavior isn't going to do it. So if we skip the money and strictly looked at our intentionality behind giving the money and receiving the money, we can actually drop in with each other. We can connect on an emotional level, both in our heart space, and we can see each other. And when we see each other, when we can hold space for each other, we can be vulnerable, we can be authentic, we can let each other into our shadows. And then all of a sudden, the need for the stuff, the need for the drugs, the alcohol, a lot of that dissipates because we don't feel less than in the company of our loved ones, because we're just in a beautiful dialogue. We're holding space for each other. And that goes so much further. And so when I'm working with families, that's often my advice is, what exactly are you trying to achieve by giving money? And is there a way we can achieve that without money at all? And it's usually just, hey, let's have a conversation free of judgment and see how far that gets us, right? It's usually a lot further than giving somebody $100.
Yes, exactly. And it's funny. And you know what question I ask when a client comes to me, especially if they're in addiction of some kind, whether it's substance misuse, drugs, alcohol, or whether it's a behavior addiction. You know what the first question I ask them? What's good about it? It's the first question I ask them. They go, yeah, I'm here. I've recognized that I've got an issue. I've recognized that there's a problem. You know, I've got a problem with alcohol, problem with cocaine, crystal meth in my case, all these things. And I want to stop. I want to make a change. The first question I ask them, Jeremy, is, okay, what's good about it? And they look at me. They're thinking, there's nothing good about it. There's absolutely nothing good about it. That's why I'm here. I want help. So I say to them, well, there's something good about it. Why are you doing it? You're doing it for, well, if you can't tell me what's good about it, tell me why you're doing it. Oh, I'm doing it because I want to escape. I want to get away from this. My parents do my nutting. It makes me feel good. Oh, okay. So it makes you feel good. Why does it make you feel good? Oh, it makes me relax. It gets me away from all the hassles. Okay. And then we work with that. And then we try and find something else that can do it. And you're right about the dopamine. It really is. It's not just with addiction, guys. We are too often governed by the dopamine rush. We let the dopamine rush run our lives. We always do. It's not about addiction. If someone says, you know, like if you get a new job, because I'm a strong believer, Jeremy, about looking at both sides of everything.
Me too.
I always say there's no prey without a predator. There's no predator without a prey. There's no good without bad. There's no bad without good. Always look at both sides of everything, because if we're sold this one-sided fantasy, the world of a one-sided fantasy, we'll be living in a nightmare, and we will not be living a fulfilling life. I'll give you an example. When someone gets a job and they're so excited about it, they're so high about it, they love it, and they're up there. Very rarely, and I reckon the masses, don't look at the drawbacks. Do not look at the drawbacks of that job or the highs, because they don't want to go down there. They want to stay in that high, and that's very dangerous. And it works the other way around. If something traumatic has happened, or something bad's happening, something negative is happening in someone's life, they can't see the benefits of that. And sometimes it's difficult to see the benefits of someone who's gone through some kind of trauma. But there are, because unless you do look at the benefits, unless you do look at the other side of it, you'll stay in that rut, and you'll stay there, and you won't be able to move on. Priya's come up with something. He goes, I remember when I was younger, and I'm going to leave this question to you, Jeremy. I remember when I was younger, I used to go camping, Girl Guides, play football with the girls' football team, cricket, being outdoors around family, and being social without the need for money or iPhones. It made me feel like I was free. Made me feel like, and the word free is what I feel today. It's what I feel today. My life without drink or drugs. In fact, when I was I never thought there would be a life without drink or drugs. I had an amazing life without drink or drugs. And I feel free from that, from that. And you're so right, Priya, when you say about the mobile phones and the money and all that. We didn't need that when we were kids, did we? We had a great life. We were climbing. Well, I don't know about you, Joe, but I was climbing trees, jumping off and breaking my arm and doing things. I'm not advocating people jumping off and breaking. But we were free. We were free. Life was basic. It was simpler, but it was nice. It was free. But I still got involved in addiction. And
Mm-hmm.
my reasons for addiction was using it as a brilliant strategy, was to get away from what I was enduring on a daily basis, was out of fear, was out of survival, was because of traumatic events that was happening in my life at that time. Didn't know it was the reason at that time. I do know now. But yeah, I mean, freedom. Freedom is a big word, isn't it? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, are you free now, Jeremy? Do you feel free?
Well, and there's something I speak to often. I've been in recovery for 12 years, and a lot of times, people say um, that they can't imagine how easy life must be. And I think it's important, at least for me personally, to be really authentic in my experience because, like you mentioned earlier, the drugs and the drink were a brilliant strategy. If they didn't serve us in some way, we wouldn't have continued to do them despite all these negative consequences. And for me, I'll be very authentic with people newly in recovery and say, there are times where it would be so much easier to just drink. In many ways, I am free. And in many ways, it is far more difficult because when I'm in a very difficult experience, I do it sober, right? And that's a really powerful statement because oftentimes it can seem, I've been around people with 30 years sober and they say like, oh, it's so easy, I never even think about it, like everything's great, I serve and I do meetings and I do this and everything's great. And for people newly in recovery, that is almost more daunting because it's like, wow, but like here I am with all this turmoil and all this suffering, and in order for it to go away, I have to give away the only things that ever helped it, right? And so the way I look at my freedom is that while it would be much easier for me to drink in these really difficult situations with these very intense and dark emotions, it's I choose the path that is more difficult, but on the other side is everything. It's harder to face these things sober. It is. And it is not comfortable. And oftentimes it's very unpleasant. And on the other side of that, I get to look back and say, wow, like in that intense experience, it was just me. I am enough. I have everything I need already to weather the heaviest storm. And it's not easy and it's not pleasant, but I'm capable of doing it. And the more I do that, the more I learn to honor those dark experiences, those intense emotions, because if I say like, oh, life's great, it's easy, everything's perfect, I'm really just kind of shoving the unpleasant down into the shadow. But without pain, there would be no pleasure. We wouldn't know what pleasure is without the pain. So it's a matter of honoring the pain by experiencing the pain rather than drinking away the pain or drugging away the pain.
That's why it's so important to look at two sides of everything.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Especially to dissolve any guilt or shame or anything. I've got a lovely comment. And this, you know what? Out of all the times I've done shows and all the times that I've been in different meetings and different support groups, I've never been asked this question, and it's such a basic question, and it's from a friend of mine, and I was honored and humbled to be on her show, and I want to introduce you and TJ to Yamil because she's
we
an
know
amazing
her.
person. Do you know her?
Oh yeah.
Oh great, yeah, of course you do. You've been on the same. Of course you do, and I think you both. I know TJ's been on her show as well. But so I wanted to. Sorry, I got it all wrong. I wanted to introduce Josie Herndon to Yamil. I think that would be a good connection to make from ATS. Yamil says, "When did you stop saying you are in recovery?" And do you ever stop saying it? I mean, I always say I'm in recovery because, but am I in recovery for the rest of my life? I mean, that's an amazing question because one is such a basic, simple question you'd think you'd be asked. I've never been asked that. I don't know if you have. I've never been asked. I've been asked, when are you going to say you're an addict? Because, you know, there's some schools of thought still say that I'm an addict, even though they haven't been in active addiction for a number of years. They still say they're an addict. They believe they'll always be an addict. That question I've been asked, but I've never been asked, and thank you for this, Yamil. I've never been asked, is it Yamil or Yamile? Yamil, well, I was on her show not so long ago, and we had so many technical difficulties. It was like, oh, and I had so many important things to say as well, but hopefully she'll be editing it accordingly. But yeah, so when do you stop saying you're in recovery, Jeremy?
I've never been asked that question before. I think for me personally, I actually stopped celebrating my recovery birthdays publicly. And I think, you know, and I've had a lot of people ask me about that. And I think the more I practice spiritual principles, the more I recognize the power of I am. Saying the words I am followed by it's a very, very powerful thing. It creates our reality. And so for me, when I say that I'm in recovery, it's not so much that I feel like I'm a lifelong addict. I know that I haven't been an addict for a very long time, waking up and needing to drink or drug just to get out of bed, right? The reason I still say that I'm in recovery is because the damage from my addiction, and more importantly, the damage that led to my addiction, takes a long time to heal. And I don't really feel like I'll ever be finished. I don't think it's ever like I get to a point and I go, wow, I did it. I'm healed and perfect. You know, of course, as a spiritual being, I know that I already am. But as a human being in this existence, I know that the work will go on forever, of getting to know myself, fostering the connection between who I am intellectually and who I am spiritually, how I am in the world. I know that that's never a finished project. It's kind of always, it's kind of like LAX, right? It's always under construction. I've never seen that airport not under construction, right? And I kind of feel like I'm the same way. And so when I say that I'm in recovery, it also opens up and creates a safe space for people around me. I've been at dinner and we're all talking about recovery this and recovery that, and our server will come up afterwards and say, wow, you guys have been such an inspiration because you're not drinking and you're having more fun than anybody else in the restaurant. And I'm on day 6 and I'm miserable, right? And so it's kind of like flying a flag that says, hey, it's safe to be you around me.
LAX, same with LHR, London Heathrow Airport. There's always something I can try.
Always, right?
Always. Well, we're coming to the end of our show, and I've got so many little messages. So I'm gonna very briefly, and I'm sorry if I haven't read everyone's out, and we'll try and get back to them. Kelly Bird says, I stood my ground with boundaries with some folks. She asked what boundaries, and he was going to come hurt me, so I stood my boundary. Give me a private message on that, Kelly, if you want to speak further on that. Tanya says, wonderful show and great work. Being, not doing, just be with others. Yes, connecting heart to heart. Kelly goes and says, I take the homeless food and socks. And Priya, the last message on this platform, she says, drink will make you forget and take you into a dark place, often lonely. That's a perceived perception. That is a perception. Yes, it does. And that's what we talk about, the brilliant strategy, which is what it is. So gin was actually made for people who are depressed and for them to start talking and letting out their emotions. It's the most popular drink today. Gin was my last drink when I was in addiction. Half these people are often crying because they feel trapped, and I can totally relate to that. Tanya said, and we're going to very run this, another Tanya, and generational trauma or abuse and old family belief systems are passed down through family members are toxic. Learning to wear different masks and taught to lie to survive is awful. Tanya, thank you for that. Link me up privately, or Jeremy or TJ, if you want to talk will be happy to talk. But I do agree.
That'd be a good show, Saf.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Mila. Thank you, Jeremy and Saf. Even with tech problem, I so enjoyed our time. I enjoyed it as well. And look at it, we're okay today. So maybe it was my fault. I think it was my fault. But let's do another show. It'd be great to have you on this show as well if you're about. There is one spot available, Yamila, if you want to get involved. Not that I'm saying anything, but guys, the thing about this show, the frustrating thing about this show, that it goes so quickly when we're talking, isn't it? And there's so much I want to say, and there's so much that Jeremy wants to say and TJ wants to say. It just time flies, and we will look at maybe doing it for an hour. But at the moment, it's 45 minutes, and we have gone over. But Jeremy, thank you as always for being here. We look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks, I believe, on the 1st of June. So Jeremy will be back. I'll be here as always every Tuesday. But before that, myself and TJ, and if you want to watch it, Jeremy, I'm sure you will. If not for me, you'll watch it for TJ. I know he's your favorite. We're on Josie's show on Sunday. I'm not sure what time it is in the US, but I know it's 3:00 in the morning on Monday morning in England. So I'll be getting up early or sleeping late. But it's on it's on recoveryview.com. So you can check it out through the website, or you can go on the Facebook page, Recovery View. It's at 3:00 UK time, so I'm not sure what time it is wherever you are in the world. Please double check it. It's going to be fascinating. It's myself, TJ, and another doctor who's going to be on the show. Tanya says thank you. Priya says thank you so much for being open. We hope to see you guys next Tuesday. If you are not in the UK, of course, if you are, you're welcome to join myself and TJ and another doctor and Josie's show on Monday early hours morning, 3 a.m. and Sunday, and I should know what time it is. I should have been more prepared, but it's Sunday evening here in the US. So, guys, thank you very much. Jeremy, any last words that you want to say?
Just thanks everybody for joining, and Saf, it's always such a pleasure. I feel like we could talk for hours, man. So I'm excited for our next show together.
Definitely. Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you, guys. You've been watching Universal Recovery every Tuesday. We're on at the same time. See us this Sunday night in the UK, in the US, Monday early hours in the morning. Recoveryview.com. Check out my book. Well, here's another reminder. Till next time.